Hello, good afternoon everyone. I am Professor Prachi Avasti from Charitram College of Nursing. I welcome you all in this international webinar with the theme Role of ICU Nurse in this current scenario. Before starting the session, I would extend my thanks to Dr. Professor Aradhana Michael, Principal Charitram College of Nursing, who has given me the opportunity to host this session. I would also thank Professor Girish to accept my invitation to be the speaker of the session. I'll introduce our guest speaker without taking much of your time. Mr. Girish Devgi is a faculty of nursing at Blue Hora University, Ethiopia. Sir is certified with International Diabetes Nurse Educator. He is BLS and ACLS nurse also. Trained nurse on safety and occupational health by Inspectorate of Factories and Boilers Institute, Goa. Sir has been resource person in many of the national and international conferences, and he has published many of the scientific papers in national and international journals. Now I shall request Sir to go live and start the session. Before starting the session, I would also like to add some of the instructions. So please share your questions in the comment box so that Sir can respond to you there after the webinar. Your feedback link will be provided on the comment box after the webinar. So you have to fill the feedback form, and by then you can get your e-certificates. And the feedback form will be valid till 12 a.m. tonight. Those who fail to attend this webinar, don't worry. We'll be soon uploading the link, YouTube link, so that you can see the education material over there. Thank you. So Mr. Girish, I request you to go live and start the session.
Very good afternoon to one and all. My name is Girish. Already I have been introduced by Professor Prachi Avasti. Before starting, I would like to thank Dr. Aradhana Michael, Principal, Charitram College of Nursing, and Professor Prachi Avasti, HOD, Obstetrics and Gynecology Nursing Department, for organizing this webinar. And today we are going to discuss about the role of ICU nurse in the current scenario. You all know what is our scenario right now. So we will be focusing mainly on a bit of history, the levels of ICUs, and then we'll be discussing about the management, the comorbidities, and specifically we will go for the COVID-19 management of the patient, because it's a respiratory infection. We have to focus on the respiratory aspect in this scenario. Finally, we will be seeing some statistical data and many more things. So let's start now. So let us focus on something about history of ICUs. There was the establishment of shock wards for resuscitation of the patients in the initial stages. It was long before, maybe around 80 to 90 years before. There was transfusion practice in early stages. Transfusion means the blood transfusion. After World War II, okay, the World War II, everyone knows what the World War. It happened we had two world wars actually. So after World War II, there was a general feeling that we should have an ICU. So there was a lot of nursing shortage forced at that time, and there were grouping of post-operative patients in recovery areas. This resulted in the grave need of ICUs, and that time it was identified that we have to create a specialized ward or specialized place for taking care of the patients who need special care or very necessary care. So that's why ICUs were created. Next, we faced the polio epidemic. Later, it was in around 1950s. Everyone may be knowing about this. So there was use of mechanical ventilation at that time because of there was a respiratory spasm during that time because of polio epidemic. We called it as iron lung at that time, the mechanical ventilation. We had an iron tube where the patient used to be placed, and it was a vacuum placed tube where a pressurized air used to be given to the patient, and he was assisted with breathing in and out in the total circle of respiratory cycle. There was development of respiratory intensive care units also at that time. At the same time, general ICUs developed for sick and post-operative patients. So you can see in the picture there are a lot of ICUs, tube-like structures which were made up of iron, which were kept. They used to give pressurized air to the patient. At that time, the ventilator used to look somewhat like this. So it was very necessary. From that period of time, it was found that yes, we need some ICU care and respiratory assistance to the patients who have respiratory problems. In the year 1950s to 1960s, cardiovascular disease were very evident. There were a lot of cases with a common cardiovascular diagnosis. In the 60s, around 30 to 40% mortality rate of myocardial infarction was recorded. In the 1965, the first specialized ICU, the coronary care unit, was established. Emergence of specialized ICUs was done in this period of time. In the year 1957, heart-lung resuscitation was introduced, and this heart-lung resuscitation, that time, which was introduced, now we call it as cardiopulmonary resuscitation. So why ICU patients are different? So the patients who are in general ward and the patients who are in other wards are totally different from ICU patients. Mainly they are very crucial. Okay, they need immediate care. They need very specific assistance and importance. That's why they are very crucial. Next is crisis. Because they are in crisis, there is a lot of changes which are happening in their body during this disease conditions, and when they are facing this COVID especially, there are a lot of changes happening in their body, in their mechanism of their body, and the way the body reacts to this disease. So they need specialized care and specific care depending upon the symptoms. They are quite serious. Okay, they are quite serious. Their multiple organ failures may be evident there. They may have neurological problems. They have respiratory problems. They need specialized care here. That's why they are quite serious here. Next is required immediate action. So here there is no waiting time or hold on. We have to immediately act on these patients, and the nurse should be very much qualified to do this. Thorough and constant observation. So everyone knows, everyone might have visited ICU. So how the ICU looks like. There is a thorough observation, 24 hours observation, which is carried on in ICUs. The patients here are totally dependent. Okay, they are totally dependent. They cannot take care of themselves because of the physical problems what they are facing. So they need care regarding the activities of daily living. They need care regarding medications, food, and they need psychological care. So a lot of things are changing in these patients. That is why these ICU patients are totally different than the normal patients or the common patients which are kept in general ward. So what is this intensive care? So intensive care is a term which is used to describe a care of patients who are extremely ill. The patients who are extremely ill and they need care, specialized care in the specific ward. So the intensive care is a care which we give to the patients who are extremely ill and those clinical condition is unstable or potentially unstable. Their condition is quite unstable. They are imbalanced. Okay, so in this case, we need to put them into a category of intensive care or extremely ill. Next is intensive care unit. What is this intensive care? It's a place. Okay, it's a place or a unit where the critically ill patients are kept and they are taken care of. Okay, so the patients who are critically ill patients which are deemed to be recoverable stage is carried out. So they are in a recoverable stage. They are put in this place and in this unit so that they can get care for their disease conditions. Next is intensive care nurse. So who is this person? So intensive care nurse, it refers as comprehensive. This specialized care, she gives a comprehensive care to these patients depending on their need. Individualized care nursing services which are rendered to patients with life-threatening conditions. So we know that these patients are totally different. They are fighting with their disease and they have life-threatening condition. So here we have to give comprehensive care to the patients, which includes physical, mental and social and all kind of ethical cares to these patients. So let's go on to the classification of intensive care units. So there are mainly three levels. The level 1, what is this level 1? It provides monitoring, observation and short-term ventilation to these patients. So here we are monitoring the patient, we observe the patients continuously and there is short-term ventilation to these patients. The nurse-patient ratio here is around 1:3. So there will be one nurse for 3 patients and the medical staff are not present in this unit all the time. So there is no necessity that the medical staff will be present in this place 24 hours or 24/7. Next is level 2. It provides observation, monitoring and long-term ventilation with resident doctors. So here we have resident doctors. The doctor will be available throughout the day to take care of these patients. Here also we are observing the patient, monitoring the patients and there is long-term ventilation. The previous one, level 1 was mild ventilation or short-term ventilation. Here you put the patients on long-term ventilation. The nurse-patient ratio is 1:2. The junior medical staff is available in the unit all the time and consultant medical staff is available if needed. If needed means on call. So here there will be a junior staff who will be available here 24/7. But the medical staff or the consultant will be available whenever it is necessary. So the ratio here will be 1:2. Next is level 3. What is here? It provides all aspects of intensive care including invasive hemodynamic monitoring and dialysis. So here the critical patients are kept who need hemodynamic monitoring. They have multiple medications going on to them. There are multiple IV lines and catheters around in their body and they need dialysis. Okay, their kidneys and their body function, other organal functions are unstable. So here we need 24 hours a nurse-patient ratio. Okay, one nurse will be there for one patient throughout the day. And even we have resident doctor 24 hours and there will be a intensivist who will be available here throughout the day so that the care of the patient is not hindered. So comorbidities and COVID-19. Let's talk about COVID-19 now. So what are these comorbidities? Comorbidities are the serious conditions what the patient is already having. The serious condition means the disease conditions which the patient already have. So as per the data what we have in the public database, the risk of infection mortality increase with advancing age and shows sexual dimorphism. So what is this? The male or the female, both may be having COVID-19, but the symptoms may be different. Okay, the symptoms may be totally different in both the patients. So there is a lot of sexual dimorphism because of the hormonal factors. There are a lot of many factors which are involved here. Male elderly individuals are at the highest risk of infection as well as death. So males are the targeted population here. So here, as according to their advancing age, the risk factors related to male is more. It's in the database. As per the research, it has been found out that the males are more prone to get this COVID-19 if they have any comorbid disorders as well as death. Patients with existing cardiovascular conditions, especially hypertension in particular, the patients who are hypertensive had the highest morbidity, around 10.5%. following infection including diabetes, lung disease and obesity. So the patients who are having hypertension, they are at a high risk of getting this disease. This also includes diabetes, lung diseases and obesity. Control of hypertensive patients during viral infection is to be optimized. So we have to be cautious to take care of these patients so that their blood pressure remains constant, stable during this period of time, because any fluctuation may result into very grave complications. Hypertensive patients should be carefully monitored for cardiovascular and other complications during COVID-19 infections. So patients who are hypertensive, they should be keenly observed so that they don't, for the complications during COVID-19 infection, if they get infected with COVID-19. Arrhythmias, around 7% of patients who did not receive ICU treatment and in 44% of subjects who were admitted in ICU. So we have seen arrhythmias as per the research, around 7% who were not in ICU. They were in general wards or they were in quarantine. They suffered with 7% of arrhythmias. But around 44% of patients who were in ICUs, they suffered with arrhythmias. They had developed arrhythmias due to this condition. Respiratory disorders are highly regarded as risk factor of COVID-19. If someone is suffering with respiratory disorder, like for example asthma, pneumonia, COPD or any other disorder which is related to respiratory, this COVID-19 is a major complications for that. While little is known regarding the effect of COVID-19 related comorbidities such as multi-organ failure, renal failure, neurological, hepatic disorder and so on. So here we have very less information that what is the relationship between comorbidities and COVID-19 infection. We are not clear about it. So further details of this manifestation remain elusive. So we don't have the clear information of what is the reason for these comorbidities in this phase of COVID-19. So factors that increase cross-infection in intensive care units. So what are the factors which increase the cross-infection in ICUs? First one is hand washing facilities are inadequate. So we all know that as a developing country we have very less facilities or very less provisions for hand washing. But in India we can say that nowadays, as per the awareness and the development of the hospitals, multi-speciality hospitals, we have adequate hand washing facilities. But sometimes what happens if there is unavailability of hand washing facilities, this may be a reason for cross-infection. Patients close together or sharing rooms. As you know, there is number of patients are increasing. Okay, the number of patients are increasing in the ICU. So this is resulting in putting the patients, or there is overcrowding of the patients. Next is understaffing. This is related to us, the nursing people. So we are understaffed. We don't have enough staff. Everywhere we are hearing the news that the nursing staffs are scarce. So this is also one of the reasons. Sometimes what happens, because of overload, we forget to maintain the hygiene, or we ignore maintaining hygiene because of excessive workload. So this results into cross-infection. Preparation of IVs on the unit. So there are IV lines which are the main source of infection transmission. Next is lack of isolation facilities. So the number of COVID patients are increasing day by day. This is resulting into facilities which can isolate them, or we can quarantine the patients. So the number of patients are increasing day by day. No separation of clean and dirty areas. So the dirty area should be separated from clean area. So if it is not separated, there is great chance of cross-infection or transmission of infection from the dirty area to the clean area. Excessive antibiotic use. If you use lot of antibiotics, the patient's immunity goes on decreasing and it will result into infection. Inadequate decontamination of items and equipment. So the items and equipments what you use for the patients who are suffering with COVID, if you do not decontaminate or sterilize it properly, this will result into cross-infection. Inadequate cleaning environment. If the environment is not clean enough, or if you don't go for fumigation frequently, this will again result into infections. Another one is catheter-associated infections. The patients who are kept in the hospital, they will suffer with catheter-associated urinary tract infections. The main reasons for this is long hospital stay. If there is long hospital stay, as you know, the patient in ICU is bedridden. He needs a catheter, so that a urinary catheter, so that his urine can be easily collected in the bag and thrown out. So there is long hospital stay, the catheter remains there for a long time, again the chances of infection increases. Malnutrition, female sex especially, abnormal serum creatinine, if the serum creatinine is increased, if the because of COVID-19, if the patient develops another secondary complications, renal complications, it will result to serum creatinine. Improper catheter care. If the nurse is overburdened, she may be having difficulty in taking care of catheter for many patients. So this may also result into urinary tract infections. This is the main thing where the infection can spread in ICU, that is use and care of vascular access lines. So we use a lot of access lines in ICUs. It may be arterial line, it may be central line, it may be venous line, and many more lines. So here what happens, there are different ports of infection spreading, like port of additives. So the medications what you are giving, or the saline, normal saline what you are giving, there is a port from where you can inject the medication into the saline water and it can go through IV line. So this is the place from where you can contaminate the area. Then there is connection with the administration set, the set what you are using to administer the medication, that is also a place for infection. Next is insertion site, where you insert the needle inside the IV line into the blood vessel, that is also a place for infection. Then injecting port, this injecting port is where you inject the medication by injections, so that is also a reason for infection, spreading of infection. Administration set connected with IV catheter, so if you are connecting IV catheter, that is also a place for spread of infection. So these all are the things what we have to remember when we are working in ICU. So these are the ports or entry, ports of entry of infection into the body. So we have to be very cautious and vigilant to identify these ports of infection. So now let us go to the respiratory support. So these COVID patients are mainly respiratory patients. So here what happens, as much as possible we have to use non-invasive options. Non-invasive options in the initial stage, so that the admission to the intensive care unit is reduced. The number of patients in the ICU has to be reduced because we don't have enough ICU beds compared to the number of patients increasing day by day. So non-invasive options support COVID-19 patients with mild and moderate respiratory distress. So we need to support the patients with mild and moderate respiratory distress. There are many ways, we'll discuss it later. May reduce the number of patients requiring intubation and mechanical ventilation. So we are talking a lot about ventilators here. So there is scarcity of ventilators throughout the world. So these initial non-invasive options may help in reducing the number of admissions of ICUs and automatically intubation also. So ICU admissions can be done only for severely ill patients who need mechanical ventilation. So this is the way how we can support our medical staffs and our stakeholders, so that we can reduce the patients in ICUs and we can take care of this pandemic. So isolation and personal protective equipment, very important here. So we have to put the patient on negative pressure room. So what is this negative pressure room here? So negative pressure room is closed room, you can say, where the room is kept in pressure. We can say that an air conditioned room can be called as negative pressure room, where all the windows and doors are closed. So this is the place where you are going to keep this COVID-19 patients. The staff should be well equipped with PPEs and N95 masks, like their gown, the gloves and eye shields and face mask and many more things, which are shoes and gloves and other things. So that can be used so that they can protect themselves. When no negative pressure is available, a closed room can be used. So if there is no negative pressure room, you can use a closed room with closed windows and doors can be used. Simple measures such as placing a surgical mask. So even though if you are following all these things, you should not forget to place a mask on the patient's face, okay, patient's mouth and nose, so that he cannot spread this COVID infection into the surrounding environment, especially in the ED, that is emergency department. You should place a mask on the patient's face so that his droplets does not spread out into the surrounding environment and gets infected to the staff. Supplemental oxygen, very important. The oxygen therapy is recommended by the WHO. Okay, the WHO has recommended oxygen therapy, and CDC also. CDC is the Center of Disease Control and other things. So this is the organization which is mainly deciding or recommending the oxygen therapy. This is the first line therapy for treating COVID-19 induced respiratory distress and hypoxia. So the patients who are induced respiratory distress and hypoxia should be treated with these guidelines which are given by the WHO and CDC. The goal of the treatment is mainly that to maintain oxygen saturation more than 90%. So our goal of maintaining the saturation of the patient is more than 90% here. So first thing, let's go with the nasal cannula. So nasal cannula is the common thing by which we are giving the oxygen to the patient. So here what we are doing is 5 to 6 liter minimum of flow increases. So here what happens, we are giving the oxygen to the patient at least 5 to 6 liter per minute. So this will help the patient to maintain an FiO2 to approximately 45%. So this is mainly useful for mildly difficulty in respiratory problems for these patients. While effective in mildly hypoxic patients, this is mainly useful, and there is dispersion of exhaled here. There is a lot of dispersion of exhaled here. So if the patient is having COVID-19, usually we try to avoid this because there is a lot of dispersion and there is a lot of spreading of the air around him. Simple mask can be used for these patients. This will give around 5 to 10 liter per minute of oxygen flow. So here what happens, the oxygen supplementation via simple mask is only marginally greater. Okay, it is not very much, but it is marginally greater than the nasal cannula. Another one is venti mask. It's very good way of giving oxygen. Here you can give the oxygen to the patient with the help of venti mask. There is a vent in this mask. So this allows more precise oxygen delivery. This is also a type of mask, but here it has vents. So it allows a precise oxygen delivery to the patient. So here what happens, the FiO2 of the fractional inspired oxygen is delivered in discrete level, typically between 24% to 60% of oxygen. So if you are giving the patient a venti mask, you are going to give around 24 to 60% of oxygen to the patient. So this is very, very useful in mildly hypoxic patients. Another one is non-rebreather masks. So this offer a safe way to provide supplemental oxygen to COVID-19 patients, as here the dispersion of droplets is very minimum. So non-rebreather mask, here is a bag where the air is collected for the patient. So here dispersion of the droplets which are secreted or excreted by the respiratory nose from the nose to the air is blocked into this bag. So there is no dispersion of droplets. So non-rebreather mask can provide supplemental oxygen up to a level of approximately 90%. So here you can give an approximately 90% of flow approaching around 15 liters per minute. So here you have to give a flow of oxygen around 15 liters per minute. Then only you can maintain a 90% of oxygen supply to the patients. But here you have to remember to prevent hypercapnia, that is the concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood. So to prevent that, the reservoir bag remain inflated at all time. So the bag should be inflated all the time. If it is not inflated, the patient may go into hypercapnia. So for that you have to keep the flow of oxygen around 8 to 10 liters per minute. Next is intermediate therapies. There are other intermediate therapies like high flow oxygen systems. So these are high flow oxygen, we can say that nasal cannula. Okay, so here we are putting a nasal cannula which is connected with a machine. Here what happens, the oxygen rich heated humidified gas is given to the patient. It is very, very helpful for maintaining good FiO2 for the patient. So given the current circumstances, you know, we have very less availability of ventilators. So this can act as a very important milestone for managing the patient with COVID-19 and to avoid endotracheal intubation. Another one good thing is bilevel, or we call it as BiPAP. BiPAP is a machine which gives a pressurized air to the patient. So you keep a mask on the patient's mouth and nose, and the mask is very secured tightly. Okay, it is secured very tightly, and the pressurized air is given to the patient. So this is helping the patient throughout the cycle of respiration, including the breathing as well as the exhaling the air. So the patient will be helped in the inspiration as well as the expiration. So here the very important thing or the convincing thing is the patient will have around 100% of FiO2. because you are going to give the oxygen directly through a machine in a pressurized mask. So directly the patient will be able to breathe, and he will be assisted in breathing as well as he will be able to he will be helped in maintaining the normal percentage of oxygen. Nebulizer. So here the patient, if he is having secretions in his respiratory tract, nebulizer is avoided here. Okay, in COVID patients, nebulization therapy is avoided. Instead, we can use meter dose inhalers. So you might have seen a patient who is in asthmatic uses this meter dose inhalers. So these are good alternatives compared to a nebulizing therapy. The most important thing, the mechanical ventilation. So here, if all these things are not working out, we will go for mechanical ventilation. So this is done only for the patient who have frank respiratory failure or multi-system organ dysfunction. The patient who is in grave risk or he has multiple organ failures, here you don't have an option and you have to put the patient on ventilator. But still in COVID patients, it's unclear what is the mechanism of this mechanical ventilation or at what time the ideal time of putting the ventilator for the patient. Still it is under consideration. The research is going on. Maybe in the future we will get the clear picture of the right time of putting ventilator or the mechanical device for these patients. But right now we don't have a clear idea at the exact time when we have to put the patient on mechanical ventilation. There are other therapeutic options like managing COVID-19 patients. There are available treatments, but clinically evident treatment is not yet decided. Okay, we are all testing the things. There are supportive things like relevant specialists and multidisciplinary teams can manage together and they can support the patients to be away from COVID-19 or prevent the complications arising because of COVID-19 infection. Next is immune suppressive. So the patients can be given immune suppressive so that his immunity does not fight with COVID-19 and again complications start. So you can go for immunosuppressive drugs so that his immunity does not create complications for these patients. Next is antiretroviral treatments. So here all are experimental. We are giving antiretroviral treatment to the patients and we are not having convincing results, but still we are using them for benefit of the patients. And potential novel therapies, there are many new therapies which are coming out. Let's hope that in future we will have some concrete therapies. So supported treatment includes oxygen therapy, that is we have to keep the patient more than 92% on room air as well as hemodynamic support. Early intubation is very important and to maintain oxygen saturation, and if the patient is having there is hypoxia, we have to put the patient on ventilation. We had already discussed. Next is high flow nasal cannula can be used alternative to ventilators because we all know that ventilators are very less in numbers with us. Another one is we can go for an option called as extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. So here what you are doing is it acts like a dialysis machine. You bring out the blood there, you oxygenate it and you pump it into the body. So this is how you are going to, it's a complicated procedure, but it can be done. It can be done, but only in the early stages. You cannot go with this in the late stages for these patients. So this is called as extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. So here, as the dialysis function works, you bring out the deoxygenated blood, oxygenate it outside the body, then again pump it into the body. So it works like this. So this is an algorithm what you can use for respiratory therapy options for this patient. So patients who are having saturation less than 90%, put him on supplemental oxygen. Okay. But if he is not having any breathing problem or moderate problems, you can put him on supplemental oxygen to maintain a goal around more than 90% of saturation. So patients with increased work of breathing or worsening hypoxia or failure to maintain oxygen saturation more than 90%. So here what you are going to do is you are going to put the patient on high flow oxygen therapies, that is nasal, that is mask, venti mask or BiPAP or other things. You can put the patient on that and monitor the patients continuously for any hypoxemia or any deterioration in his condition. If the patient does not respond to it properly, then you have to go for ventilation. You have to check the patient for at least 2 hours for this. Next is patient with severe respiratory failure and multi-organ failure or comorbidities. You have to go, and if the patient is having ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and hemodynamic instability, then the last option remains that you have to go with mechanical ventilation and put him on ventilator. So there are some medications which are available, but we don't have a concrete results because with the help of these medicines. There is something called as Lipovir and Ritovir, which can be used, but no difference in the outcome in the present days. So we have tested it, but there is no outcome. These are the drugs which are used for HIV infection, but they are under test, but we don't have a concrete result because of this. Next is Remdesivir, which was in the media recently, that it has helped the patients with COVID-19, which was used in case of Ebola. But its cardiovascular effects and toxicities are unknown. The patient may have a lot of toxicities because of this. An anti-malarial drug, which was also been discussed recently, even the President of America told about this, hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine. But this is also something which is under discussion and debatable, that whether it is going to help or not. But still we are trying this, and patients have been given with these medications, and some patients have given a positive results also. But it can be used as a prophylaxis, but we don't have the correct research papers or research done on this. However, the data to the date to support these drugs are weak, and the cardiac toxicities are considerable. So these drugs have a lot of cardiac toxicities and multi-organ toxicities. So these drugs cannot be said that it's quite safe to be given for the patients. So there are adverse cardiac events due to these drugs. So we can say that ventricular hypertrophy around 22%, hypokinesia around 9.4%, heart failure around 25+%, pulmonary arterial hypertension around 3.9%. So a lot of cardiac abnormalities because of these anti-malarial drugs have been seen. So it is conflicting, or it is contradictory that we can use these medications in these patients, but still more research has to be done on this. Another one is withdrawal of chloroquine. So once the patient develops some complications, you withdraw the patients with this chloroquine. There are some irreversible damage which are seen in these patients, which are of grave importance. Around 12.9%, and around death around 30.9% we had seen cardiac dysfunction. So we have to be very vigilant and careful while considering the medications to be given to these patients. So ventilators, if the patient is on ventilator, how to take care of these ventilators? Very important. First is clean and disinfect this ventilator. So how to clean it? So we have to go for the manufacturer's manual, and we have to see how it should be cleaned. So according to the manufacturer's manual, we have to disinfect these ventilators when we are switching this from one patient to another patient. Suctioning is very important for patients who are ventilator and respirator support. Hand washing is important, as you know. A single-use catheter is usually preferred for the patients. The catheter for removal of secretions is usually preferred for. But if there is no availability of single-use catheter, you can go for reusable catheter, but it should be used for only one patient, and remember that it should be changed every 8 to 12 hours. This catheter can be placed in a sterile water in between the suction procedure, but it should be changed around after 8 to 12 hours. So there is some good news that around only 5% of patients with critical diagnosis who need advanced critical care. So we have only 5% of patients who need critical care. Around 15% of patients with severe diagnosis who need essential critical care or oxygen. So 15% they need oxygen therapies. Only 5% need mechanical ventilation, and around 80%, that is more than half, or you can say that more than three-fourths of the patients, the total patients of COVID-19, they just can be taken care without any vigorous treatment in ICUs. So this is a good thing what we have seen in the recent days, especially in India. Hand washing is quite important, so you have to hand wash everywhere. This has been advertised, so hand washing is very important for us. So let's see a little bit about the role of nurse here. So till now we saw the practicality of the nursing in the ICU. Let's see about the role of responsibility of a staff nurse in an ICU. She should be continuously monitoring the patient. So she has to monitor the patient throughout the day, 24/7. Keep ready emergency trolley. She has to be prepared for any kind of untoward situation and any kind of patients she can receive at any time. So she should be ready with her crash and the trolley. Efficient individualized care. Here the comprehensive care comes. She has to give a comprehensive care to the patient. Counseling and information to the family. Usually in COVID-19 ward, the families are not allowed. So there is a lot of importance of this counseling and giving the information to the family. Application of policies and procedure. You have to go with the local government and the local institutional policies and procedures, and you have to follow it accordingly. Proper records of all activities. This is very, very necessary because the patient's records may be helpful in managing of this disorder as a whole. Maintain infection control principles. So everyone knows what are infection control principles. Use of proper PPE and masks throughout their duty hours. Keep update and advanced information. So the nurse should be updated with all the information given by the local government and the media and the health institutions regarding managing this infection. As a nurse manager, what are her role? That is, first is building the trust among her staff and the interdisciplinary team. This is very important. She has to plan the ward, ensure that there is adequate staffing, organizing the activities of the staff so that the staff does not become overburdened and they get exhausted. The staffing should be done with an organized way. Leading and controlling. She should be a leader and she should control the ward as such that the patients can be taken care correctly. Next, she should act like a clinical expert. She should have updated knowledge about all this information about COVID-19. Attracting and retaining nurses. We have a grave shortage of nurses. So attracting of nurse in this situation is very important so that we don't face the shortage of nurses. So finally, I would like to say that ICUs also treat the dying. So it has been said that life is pleasant, but death is peaceful. But with the transition from the pleasant to this life to the death is quite difficult. So this is where the role of nurse in ICU comes. This has been said by Essex Moore, that is professor of biochemistry, Boston. So here, the patient who comes to an ICU, he is alive, but sometimes we see death in the patient. So the transition is quite difficult. Here the ICU nurse comes to take care of this. So I would like to ask any questions if there are any questions. Let me see in your comments. So I have a question here. I can see. Yeah. Is the nurse obliged to take care of COVID-19 patient in an ICU? Of course, the nurse is obliged to take care of COVID-19 patients in the absence of PP. Okay. In the absence of PP. So this is a little confusing because if there is no availability of PP, the nurse has to take care of herself first, then the patient. You cannot say that without PP you have to take care of the patient. So it is under discretion. It is the right of a nurse to accept or not to accept to take care of the patient without a appropriate PPs. So my suggestion will be, if it is the responsibility of the institution to provide adequate number of PPs to the nurse, because the safety of the nurse is very important. It comes under occupational health. So the institution role is very important here. Okay. There is another question. Yeah. What about the staffing pattern? So staffing pattern remains the same. The staffing pattern remains the same. There is no changes in the staffing pattern in an ICU for COVID-19, the staffing pattern remains same. Okay. Okay, another question, if there is, how to manage a patient without ventilator if there is no ventilator available. Okay, so how to take care of a patient without ventilator if he needs a ventilator? So I believe that you want to say that if there is no ventilator, how to take care of the patient. Actually, this is a crisis. We have very less ventilators. But if the patient needs ventilator, if you don't have adequate stock of ventilator, we have to arrange it. We have to arrange it from another department, possibly. Otherwise, we can use different ways. Already I had said you can use a BiPAP machine here. You can use a BiPAP machine, and you can conservatively, for a short period of time, you can manage the patient unless you procure a ventilator. But procuring ventilator is quite difficult. This is something is debatable and has to be managed by the management. Most of the hospitals throughout the world are facing this difficulty. So it is a crisis. We have to get the ventilators. But the good thing is we have only 5% of the casualties in an ICU who are been admitted because of COVID-19. So finally, thank you very much, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. I would like to thank Chowtharam College of Nursing for this, the Dr. Aradhana Michael and Professor Prachi Avasthi for giving me this opportunity. I would request to stay tuned and do not leave this page. Professor Prachi Avasthi will be online and she will be guiding you regarding the feedback form as well as the certification. Please be online. Do not leave the page. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and please be safe. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Girish, for this enlightening session, and hope the students have taken knowledge about what they have to take care of during taking care of the COVID-19 patients in the ICU. And I am very grateful to all the viewers for joining us on this live webinar. And I would also like to extend my thanks to Mr. Philomen, who is the IT person behind these live sessions. And last but not the least, I would again thanks Dr. Professor Aradhana Michael ma'am for giving me the opportunity to host the session. Now I will share feedback link on the comment box, and you need to fill the feedback form. After that you will get your certificates, and please don't forget that the link is valid till 12 midnight. Thank you so much. Thank you.